Attention. Uncut version, posted in the comments. Things weren't easy, and to be honest, I couldn't even remember a time when they really had been. Ever since I began to understand myself as a person, ever since the first whispers of my identity back in childhood, everything seemed like a constant silent battle with myself. I was forced to hide my tastes, my truest desires, like someone hiding a shameful secret at the bottom of a locked drawer, and all this just to maintain an image that was never really mine. In my teens, the conflict only intensified. I found myself constantly watching those older guys, usually my brother's friends, my father's colleagues, or neighbors who walked by in tight shirts and carefree smiles. They didn't even notice, but to me their every gesture was magnetic. I found them beautiful, charming in a way that took my breath away and at the same time filled me with guilt. Inside me, something told me that it was wrong, not because it actually was, but because that's what I had been taught. So I tried to compensate. I started dating girls, not because I wanted to, but because I felt emotionally obligated to. It was as if I were repeating a script written by someone who never really knew me. I tried hard to be the ideal boyfriend, did everything right, said I loved her, smiled in photos, and sometimes even convinced myself for a few moments that it could work. But the more time passed, the heavier it became to carry this character, the more suffocating it became to hide that part of me that cried out for freedom. It was like living imprisoned inside my own body, watching the world outside happen for real while I was just acting. Time went by, and as if everything were following the course of a tide I couldn't control, one of those relationships with women ended up taking on too serious a dimension. Without even realizing it, I found myself involved in a commitment that went beyond casual dating, and before I could face my own feelings honestly, I ended up getting married. Yes, I know. I know I shouldn't have done it, that it was like burying even deeper everything I really was. But at that time, in that confused and fear-filled emotional state, it seemed like the right thing to do, the only possible path. My family has always been conservative, the kind that leaves no room for nuance, that treats everything with a rigid, inflexible right and wrong. My parents, I couldn't even imagine the possibility of coming out to them as gay. That idea paralyzed me inside. I felt ashamed just thinking about it, ashamed of myself. A knot formed in my stomach whenever any thought related to another man arose, whether it was the beauty of a stranger on the street or the memory of a gaze that lingered too long on mine. I interpreted all of this as a kind of internal transgression. It was as if, inside me, every thought that brought me closer to my truth was an affront to the world I had built to please others. I felt fear. A suffocating fear, without form, without logical explanation, but still real. The simple act of admiring a man already seemed like a condemnation to me. It was as if, in the silence of my mind, I was being judged and, worse, judging myself with a cruelty that no one outside could ever apply. Living in an invisible prison, and worse, a prison that I myself helped to build. My marriage was lukewarm, neither good nor bad. It was like a straight line that never went up or down, just went on, monotonously. We lived like roommates, we slept in the same bed, shared the same spaces, but there was no more warmth, no desire, no curiosity that drives a couple. And maybe, deep down, there never really had been. We didn't have children, and sometimes I think it was a silent relief, as if the universe knew that bringing a child into that artificial life would be unfair. My routine was predictable, almost rehearsed. Work, home, home, work. The days passed like repeated pages, and life went on at this slow pace. From time to time, to keep from going crazy, I would go out with some friends to play soccer. It was my little escape, that moment when I could sweat, laugh, and pretend to be normal. And it was on one of those ordinary days, on a muggy late afternoon, that everything changed. I was 42 years old. We were leaving the field, exhausted, heading straight for the locker room. Some went straight to the shower. Others, like me, just changed clothes quickly. And then, I saw him, for the first time. He was there, in the corner of the locker room, with his back turned at first, calmly taking off his shirt. He was changing to take the field with his team, who were waiting outside for us to leave. When he turned around, my heart beat so hard that it felt like someone had stuck their hand in my chest. I tried to hide it, but it was useless. That man completely disarmed me. He was wearing only his underwear. His skin was tanned by the sun, his body mature and firm, with that confidence that only time can bring. He had a well-trimmed beard, the kind that perfectly frames the face, and his hair was cut with precision, but without looking forced. And his gaze, my God, his gaze. He looked at me, straight into my eyes. It wasn't just any look, it was firm, confident, curious. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to mess everything up inside. I felt naked, exposed, as if he had seen something that even I didn't quite know how to name. He finished getting dressed, calmly pulling his t-shirt over his slightly toned stomach, adjusting his shorts. And when he walked past me, so close that I could feel the heat of his body, he looked me in the eyes again, unhurried, undisguised, and said in a deep, soft voice, full of presence, "Hello, how are you?" I swallowed hard. The words got tangled up. All I could manage to say was a half-whispered, half-lost, "Hi, good." He kept walking, leaving the locker room, and his scent lingered in the air, a woody, intense smell that stuck to my nose like a tattoo. At that moment, everything inside me trembled. I couldn't think of anything else. The fear that had accompanied me for decades vanished like smoke. The insecurity that had always made me walk hunched over dissolved. It was as if a key had been turned forcefully inside my chest, unlocking something old and dormant. And then it came back, that desire, that hunger. The same one I felt when I was a teenager, when I watched in silence and desired in secret. But now it came back stronger, more alive, more impossible to ignore. I was no longer a boy. But for the first time, I felt truly alive. I stood there, in the middle of the locker room, as if time had paused just to let me process everything. My body was still warm from the game, sweaty, but my mind was boiling for another reason. The only thing I could think was, how could I see him again? How could I make sure it didn't end there, with that brief exchange of glances and a hello that had turned me inside out? I thought quickly, as if something were pushing me from within, and then I had an idea. I'll watch the game. That would give me more time, more chance to observe, to feel, maybe even exchange another word, or just understand what it was I was feeling. I left the locker room and went straight to the stands. I chose a seat a little further away, but with a good view of the field. I sat down with my heart still racing, trying to look as natural as possible. I grabbed my phone and sent a quick message to my wife, saying that I would be a little late, that I might go out for a drink with the guys after the game. She replied with a short, "Okay," without questioning. No questions, no demands, and in a way, that indifference also struck me. There, sitting, with the sun already beginning to set on the horizon and the warm afternoon breeze gently blowing on my face, I saw him again. He entered the field with his team, wearing the group's dark blue jersey. His posture was confident, his body moving naturally, as if each step were part of a choreography that only he knew how to dance. I watched, carefully, disguising my gaze, as if I were just watching the game, but in fact attentive to his every move. Fortunately, I wasn't alone. A few other people were watching the game. From there, some relatives of other players, people from the community. That gave me a certain security, a comfortable anonymity. I went unnoticed, and that left me free to observe more calmly. He played well. He had strength, technique, but what caught my attention most was the lightness with which he moved, as if he were completely at ease in that space. Sweat ran down his neck, soaking his shirt, and I found myself wishing it would ride up, revealing more of that body that had already captivated me with a single glance in the locker room. With each passing minute, I felt more and more trapped in that moment. Something inside me stirred, something old, dormant, but now awake, hungry, and impossible to ignore. And then, in one of those moments when the game seems to slow down, when everything around you becomes just background noise, he saw me. He was in the middle of a play, about to receive the ball, but for some reason he looked away from the game and looked straight at me. It took me by surprise. His eyes found mine with precision, as if they already knew exactly where to look for me. and that's when it happened. He blinked. A subtle, quick blink, but one loaded with intention. It wasn't a random gesture, the kind we make without meaning to. It was direct. It was clear. And it was for me. At that moment, I felt my whole body react. A heat rose up my back. My face must have turned red. My chest raced in a way it hadn't in a long time. I stood there, completely bewildered, trying to appear calm, while inside I was a whirlwind. That confirmed what I had thought until then was just a figment of my imagination. I wasn't going crazy. It wasn't something I had made up in my head, nor was it neediness or projected desire. He had felt it too. He had noticed. He had responded. And in that small gesture, in that wink so full of meaning, it seemed that all the walls I had spent years building around myself were beginning to crack. It was as if someone had turned on a light in the dark room where I had been living for decades. I was so nervous that my hands were sweating. My shirt was sticking to my chest, and even with the light afternoon breeze, I felt like I was on fire. I couldn't pay attention to the game anymore, to the voices around me, to anything else. It all boiled down to that look and that wink, which, silently, had said so much more than any words could have. I tried to compose myself. I took a deep breath, adjusted my posture on the bleacher seat, and pretended to be focused on the game, as if nothing had happened. But inside, my heart was completely out of control, racing as if I had run a marathon. It was a mixture of nervousness, euphoria, desire, and an almost childlike sense of discovery. I didn't understand why. I couldn't find a rational explanation for it all. After all, I had been attracted to other men before. This wasn't new to me. But that man had affected me in a way that went beyond any logic. It was as if he had touched a place I didn't even know existed, as if he had touched directly on what I had always hidden, but now seemed to want to scream out. It was more than physical attraction, although that was there, alive, pulsing, difficult to control. But there was something else, something in his gaze, in the way he saw me. It wasn't just desire. It was as if he had seen inside me, as if he had recognized in me something that he also carried. And that destabilized me. It shook my deepest foundations, the layers that I had spent my whole life trying to keep intact, protected. Because, at that moment, it wasn't just fear that I felt. It was also an enormous desire to allow myself to know who he was, to hear his voice again, to understand why, among so many people, he had managed to pierce me with a single glance and a wink. I felt like a teenager again, but with the intensity of a man who had spent his entire life denying himself, molding himself, hiding himself. And now it was as if everything was spiraling out of control. And instead of fear, what I felt was a crazy desire to let it happen. Finally, the game came to an end. The last few minutes seemed to drag on forever, as if time had made a point of torturing me, leaving me trapped in that silent anxiety, not knowing if it had all been real or just a delusion born of my repressed desire. But then, when the final whistle echoed across the field, I saw him coming, without deviating, without feigning disinterest. He came straight toward me, his eyes fixed on me, his body still sweaty from the game, his expression relaxed, but carrying something behind it. A firmness in his gait that took my breath away. My body froze. I didn't know what to do with my hands, my eyes, my breathing. I took my cell phone out of my pocket in an automatic reflex, as if it would protect me, pretending to be busy with some imaginary message. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, but I could feel his every step approaching like a warm vibration through the air. And then he stopped in front of me. His shadow covered my face and, in a provocative tone full of disguised malice, he said, "Hey, handsome, did you enjoy the game?" I felt my face flush. I smiled awkwardly, trying to look natural, but my whole body was shaking inside. "You play very well," I replied with a shy smile, almost stumbling over my words. He took a step closer, lowered his face slightly, and said in that hoarse voice, laden with intention, "You haven't seen anything yet." And then he smiled. That smile. Mischievous. Handsome. Dangerous. The kind that breaks down defenses and makes the ground disappear beneath your feet. I don't know where the courage came from, but I looked him straight in the eye, holding that gaze for a few seconds that seemed suspended in the air, and said, "Then show me." His laugh was spontaneous, delightful, almost conspiratorial. We laughed together, and for a moment, all the nervousness dissolved in the lightness of that moment. But soon after, he lowered his voice a little, as if he wanted to keep what he was about to say just for me, and said, "Wait for me in the parking lot. I'm going to take a quick shower." I just nodded, my heart beating so loudly that it seemed to echo in my ears. "Okay, I'll wait." He winked again, turned his back, and walked toward the locker room with the dangerous calm of someone who knows exactly the effect he is having. I sat there, unresponsive, trying to understand what was about to happen, and at the same time, already certain that nothing in my life would be the same after that night. I stayed there for a few seconds, motionless, my body still on the bleacher seat, but my mind already far away, traveling toward the parking lot, where anything could, and perhaps would happen. The sky had already darkened almost completely, and night fell silently, bringing with it a warm, humid air that clung to the skin like an unspoken secret. The lights on the poles around the field came on one by one, casting a soft yellow glow on the concrete floor and dry grass, projecting long, diffuse shadows, as if even the environment was preparing for something different that night. I got up slowly, my muscles still tense, as if every part of my body knew that something was about to happen. I descended the steps cautiously, trying to convince myself that I was in control, but inside I was in turmoil. The parking lot was beginning to empty, with the sounds of doors slamming, engines starting, and a few muffled voices in the distance. I leaned against the side of my car, under the flickering light of a street lamp, which blinked from time to time as if it were about to go out. The yellowish glow cast my shadow on the ground, stretched out and trembling, and it seemed to reflect exactly how I felt inside. Anxious, fragmented, on the verge of something new. And then, between the lights that mingled with the darkness, I saw him. He came out of the locker room with his hair still damp, his freshly bathed body glistening under the light of the nearest lamppost, which made drops of water slide slowly down the skin of his neck. He wore a simple black t-shirt that clung slightly to his still warm chest, revealing the contours of his torso, and denim shorts that perfectly molded his firm thighs. He walked with that same carefree, confident gait, as if nothing in that world could shake his peace. When he saw me, he smiled a corner smile, full of intention, effortless, and he came straight to me. With each step, the light sound of his sneakers against the concrete mingled with the buzzing of night insects around the light. The heat of his body seemed to cut through the warm night air. He stopped right in front of me, his face partially illuminated by the streetlight above us, which cast a soft light on his thick beard and dark, intense eyes. "I thought you were going to run away," he said in a low voice, laden with playful defiance. I tried to smile, still nervous, but now I had nowhere to run. "I thought about running away," I admitted, in a sincere, almost shy tone. "But something made me stay." He took a step closer. The scent of fresh soap mixed with woody perfume invaded my senses. His warmth seemed to envelop me. "I'm glad you stayed," he replied, his eyes locked on mine. "I saw the way you looked at me. Back in the locker room, it wasn't just curiosity." I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, but my mouth was wet with nervousness and anticipation. "It wasn't," I said softly. "It was more than that." He smiled again, this time with a different gleam in his eyes. He moved closer until his hand touched my shoulder, firm and warm. "Would you like to go for a drive?" I looked around instinctively, but the parking lot was almost empty. The silence of the night was broken only by the constant hum of the lamp above us and the distant sound of a motorcycle accelerating on a nearby street. "I would," I replied without hesitation. He unlocked the car with a discreet click of the remote. The lights came on for a second, illuminating the side of the vehicle with that quick white glow that contrasted with the yellowish tone of the streetlights. He walked around and opened the passenger door for me, a simple gesture, but one full of presence. I got in. The seat was slightly cold, contrasting with the warmth of my body. When the door closed, the sound of the outside world seemed to disappear. Inside, there were only the two of us. And that moment, I already knew, was going to change everything. As soon as I got into the car, the sound of the door closing behind me seemed to seal something, as if I had left behind not only the almost empty parking lot, but my entire life up to that point. The silence inside was different. Dense, charged with tension, but a good kind of tension, the kind that anticipates what is to come. The air was still impregnated with the smell of his body, his cologne, fresh soap, and for a few seconds I just stood there, feeling, breathing deeply, trying to calm down. He got into the car with the same calm as before, adjusted the seat, started the engine, and then looked at me sideways, with a calm smile, as if all this were natural, as if he knew exactly what he was doing, and maybe he did. "I live nearby," he said, his eyes briefly meeting mine before turning forward. 5 minutes from here. Would you prefer to go there? To be more comfortable?" My throat locked up for a moment, but my body responded before I did. I nodded and replied with a "yes, I would" that came out in a lower tone than I expected. He smiled slightly and started driving, slowly pulling out of the parking lot. The night outside was humid and hot. The streets were quiet, lit only by the streetlights that passed one by one through the window, casting intermittent beams of yellow light inside the car. The radio was off. No sound, except for the engine and our breathing. And yet, the silence was not uncomfortable. It was dense, heavy, as if words were unnecessary. I looked out the window, but my mind was entirely on him. I thought about how that day, which had started like any other, had turned everything upside down. And now here I was, sitting in the passenger seat of a man I had just met, but who seemed to have touched parts of me that even my wife, after years of living together, had not reached. Soon he turned onto a residential street, more remote, quiet, with few houses, all low, with discrete walls and yellow lights illuminating the facades. He stopped in front of one of them, closed gate, small, well-kept garden, and a narrow garage. Simple, but cozy. "We're here," he said, turning slightly toward me. The smile on his face was no longer provocative, it was serene, but his eyes still had that sparkle, that promise. He turned off the car, opened the door, and waited for me to get out. We walked to the gate, which he opened with a key attached to a worn leather keychain. We entered together, and the sound of the gate closing behind us echoed loudly in the silence of the street. I knew that by walking through that door, I wasn't just entering his house. I was crossing a line within myself that, for years, I hadn't even had the courage to look at. And now, on that warm night, under the dim light of the streetlights and the soft scent of the dew-covered garden, I was ready. Chuan Ti Ding Duan. As soon as we entered, he calmly closed the door, turned the key, and locked it with a sharp, decisive click that echoed through my bones like a warning that from that moment on, the outside world no longer mattered. It was just the two of us, inside that silent house, enveloped in the dim light of indirect lighting, the woody scent coming from the furniture, and a tension that was now almost palpable in the air. He turned slowly, and the look he gave me left no room for doubt. There was no hesitation, no fear, only certainty, a raw, unbridled desire, present in every inch of his body. He took 2 steps toward me, and without saying a word, pulled me firmly by the waist with his 2 warm, confident hands, and then he kissed me. It wasn't a light kiss. It wasn't shy. It wasn't afraid. It was a kiss full of desire, with pent-up longing, with hunger. His mouth found mine as if it already knew exactly where to fit, and the taste was so intense that it made me forget to breathe. He kissed me hard, with the urgency of someone who had waited too long, with the surrender of someone who recognizes in the other a mirror of everything he also held inside. His hands explored my back with pressure, pulling me closer, pressing our bodies together, our chests rising and falling in an already uneven rhythm. The heat of his skin, even under his t-shirt, burned against mine. His tongue invaded my mouth with dominance, and I let it, completely surrendered, feeling my body respond on its own, as if everything inside me had been screaming for this for years. My heart pounded in my chest, and every second of that kiss seemed to tear away pieces of fear, guilt, silence. All of that crumbled with every touch, every pressure of his lips, every gasping breath exchanged between kisses that didn't want to stop. It was more than physical. It was liberation. It was as if, in that kiss, I had finally found the answer to a question I had avoided asking my whole life. And now, inside that locked house, Under that hungry kiss full of truth, I knew there was no turning back. In the middle of that intense kiss, where everything seemed to revolve around the heat of our bodies and the force of desire that took hold of us, I paused for a moment, almost breathless, my lips still touching his, and said in a hoarse whisper, "I still don't know your name." He gave a low, hoarse laugh, which came out amid hot, ragged breathing, and with a smile on the corner of his mouth he replied, "Nice to meet you, I'm David." I looked into his eyes, his fingers still on my waist, still tasting the recently interrupted kiss, and said, almost smiling, "Nice to meet you, David, I'm Thomas." Before I could say anything else, he kissed me again with even more abandon, as if the fact that we now knew each other's names gave us permission to lose ourselves more deeply in each other. My God, what a good kiss. It was the kind of kiss you never forget, a kiss that carried everything that had been repressed, swallowed, suffocated, a kiss that tasted of discovery, of freedom, of everything I didn't know I needed, but now didn't want to live without. The atmosphere between us grew hotter, denser, more intimate with every passing second. Our hands were no longer still, they explored, slid, pulled with desire. The air inside seemed heavier, the silence of the house only enhanced by our sighs, by our increasingly rapid breathing. And then, with my heart pounding, I backed away just a little, still too close for our bodies to separate, and looked into his eyes. "David, I want to be honest with you," I said, my voice choked with emotion and nervousness. "I've never been with another man. I've never been with anyone like this. So I don't know what might happen here today." He didn't look away for a second. He smiled calmly, serenely, with that warm glow in his eyes that enveloped me completely, and replied with sweet firmness, "Destiny wanted us to meet." I frowned slightly, confused and curious, and asked, in an almost playful tone, but full of truth, "Oh, really? And why is that?" He moved closer, almost touching his forehead to mine, and said in a low, intimate voice, "Because I'm also. It's my first time." I was silent for a second, feeling my heart slow down, as if that simple sentence of his had erased all my fear, all the pressure. My body relaxed, my mind calmed down, and an involuntary smile formed on my lips. "So, shall we find out together?" I asked, my voice now firmer, more confident. He nodded, with a gleam in his eyes that said it all. "Let's do it." And that night in that quiet house, with the lights dimmed, the windows closed, and the outside world completely forgotten, we gave ourselves to each other. We discovered something new, something that had been hidden inside us for years, waiting for the right moment to be born. And when it was born, it was with strength, with truth, with surrender. It was more than sex. It was more than desire. It was the feeling of finally touching something that had always been there, waiting. Something that had no name, but that our bodies and our hearts recognized in the same instant. When it was over between us, he drove me back to the parking lot. The ride was quiet, with that comfortable silence between two bodies that had just recognized each other. He stopped his car next to mine, turned to me, and looked at me for a few seconds that seemed to hang in the air. We exchanged one last kiss, calmer, longer, like a farewell full of unspoken promises. I said goodbye, with my heart racing, and got into my car. That day I returned home in ecstasy. Driving through the almost empty streets, with the lampposts lighting up the asphalt in a rhythmic pattern, it seemed that everything around me had changed color. The lights were no longer just lights, they shone brighter, more vividly, and I felt different, as if I had awakened from a deep sleep that had lasted a lifetime. My world, which had always been so gray and predictable, was now colorful, pulsing inside me. But along with that wonderful feeling came fear. A silent, heavy fear that crept into my thoughts when the euphoria gave me a brief respite. Fear of what might happen, fear of the consequences, fear of myself and the choices I had just made. It was like walking on a tightrope. On one side, the most intense happiness I had ever felt. On the other, everything I had ever known and feared losing. I arrived home, trying to look normal. I entered silently. The house was dark, immersed in that artificial tranquility of the early morning. I took a long shower, letting the hot water run down my body, trying to wash away not only the sweat and fatigue, but also the confusion that swirled inside my head. I rested my hands on the shower wall, closed my eyes, and his face came to my mind with frightening clarity. His smile, his gaze, his firm yet affectionate manner. When I went to bed, my wife was already asleep. Her breathing was regular, calm, as if nothing in the world had changed. I lay down next to her, staring at the dark ceiling, my heart still racing, reliving every detail of the night, every sensation. I slept little, a light, restless sleep, full of mixed thoughts and emotions. The next morning, daylight timidly entered through the window, and as soon as I picked up my phone, I saw the notification. My heart leapt even before I opened the message. It was from him, from David. "Good morning, handsome. Yesterday, I met the love of my life. I didn't believe I could still feel this way about someone. But I'm in love with you. I fell in love. I'm sorry if I'm being too direct." I read that message more than once. Each word seemed to hit my chest hard. My heart raced in a way that left me breathless. I knew at that very moment that I felt the same way. It was impossible to deny. Something inside me had definitely changed that night, and there was no way to pretend otherwise. But the fear returned. Strong. Paralyzing. Fear of saying out loud or in typed words what could change everything at once. Fear of crossing a point of no return. I stared at my phone screen for long seconds, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, my heart asking for one thing, and my reason begging for caution. Then I took a deep breath, and I replied the best I could at that moment. "Good morning. I was happy to hear that. I really enjoyed meeting you, and I already miss you." As soon as I sent it, I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. It was the most I could say, even though I knew that, deep down, my heart had already made its choice. 3 days passed, and in those 3 days I couldn't stop thinking about David for a single moment. He was in everything, in the silence of the house, in the sound of the shower, on the way to work, behind the wheel of the car, in the reflection of the mirror. It was as if that night had left a permanent mark on me. Every day he sent me messages, simple, affectionate messages, full of longing, saying he wanted to see me, that he missed me, that he thought about me all the time. And every notification made my heart race, made my body react, made the longing grow even more. I tried to control myself, tried to act normally, but I could no longer hold it inside me. The longing was physical. It tightened my chest, took away my concentration, made me restless. At the same time, guilt came. A heavy, silent guilt that followed me like a shadow. I felt guilty for betraying my wife, for living a secret life, for smiling at my phone while she was there, sharing the same house with me, unaware of what was going on inside me. And the fear only grew. Fear of asking for a separation, fear of her reaction, fear of my family's reaction, fear of changing everything after so many years of living on autopilot. My head was in chaos. On one side, the man I had always been, molded to please others, to keep up appearances. On the other, the man I had now discovered, at 42, alive, in love, desiring something I never had the courage to admit. I was confused, lost. I knew I had to make a decision, because that way I was only going to hurt everyone, my wife, David, and especially myself. I couldn't put it off any longer, pretend nothing was happening, or wait for time to solve it on its own. Something had to change. As soon as I decide what to do, I'll come back here and share it with you. So, subscribe to the channel to follow part 2 of this story. And don't forget, the uncut version is in the comments. Kisses. See you soon.